Picture this: a massive container ship longer than 3 football fields, weighing 50,000 tons, worth $200 million when it was built. Now it's worth more dead than alive. Every year, over 1,000 ocean-going ships reach the end of their life. And most of them end up on a beach in India, where an army of workers armed with nothing but cutting torches and sledgehammers tear these giants apart piece by piece. Today, we're going inside the world's largest ship graveyard, where some of America's retired naval vessels and cruise ships meet their final fate. This story begins in Alang, a stretch of beach in Gujarat, India. If you look at satellite images, you'll see something incredible. Dozens of massive ships lined up along the shore like beached whales. This 10-mile beach handles nearly 50% of the world's ship recycling. Over 400 ships per year, the scale is absolutely staggering. But here's the question: why India? Why do ships from America, Europe, and Asia all end up on this particular beach? The answer changed the global shipping industry forever. Back in the 1970s, shipbreaking happened in developed countries like the United States and Britain. Dry docks, cranes, proper facilities, but it was expensive and slow. Then in 1983, a Kuwaiti tanker owner named Mohammed Hamza had a problem. His ship was too old to operate, but scrapping it conventionally would cost more than the steel was worth. He made a calculated decision: beach the ship at high tide in Alang, wait for low tide, and let Indian workers dismantle it. The labor was cheap, environmental regulations were minimal, and the beach's unique tidal range, reaching 40 feet, meant ships could be driven straight onto shore. It worked, and it changed everything. Today, Alang employs over 50,000 workers across nearly 200 ship-breaking yards. But before we get there, let's follow a ship's final journey. When a ship gets too old, usually after 25 to 30 years of service, operating costs skyrocket. Rust weakens the hull. Engines need constant repairs. Insurance rates climb. Eventually, shipping companies make the calculation: this vessel is worth more as scrap metal than as a working ship. The ship gets sold to a demolition company, often for $5 to $7 million, depending on size and steel prices. Cash buyers in India, Bangladesh, and Pakistan compete for these vessels. Then comes the final voyage, a slow journey toward the beach with a skeleton crew, sometimes just 10 to 15 people managing a ship that once required 50. As the ship approaches Alang, pilots come aboard. These specialists know the tides, the beach gradient, and the exact moment to drive the ship ashore. Timing is everything. At high tide, the captain opens the throttles one last time. The ship accelerates toward the beach at full speed, around 12 to 15 knots. The bow strikes sand. The momentum carries the vessel up the beach. As the tide recedes over the next 6 hours, the ship settles onto the sand, stranded. And this is where it gets wild. Hundreds of workers swarm the ship immediately. They have a tight window because the next high tide comes in 12 hours and they need to secure everything before then. First priority: drain all fluids. Fuel oil, lubricants, hydraulic fluid, anything valuable or hazardous gets pumped out into trucks. Then the real work begins. Workers climb aboard with oxy-acetylene cutting torches, massive sledgehammers, and basic hand tools. No cranes, no heavy machinery, just human labor and fire. They start from the top, cutting the superstructure into manageable pieces. Each section of steel plate weighs hundreds or thousands of pounds. Workers use winches and chains to lower pieces down to the beach, where others cut them into smaller chunks. Here's something most people don't realize. Every single piece of that ship has value. The bridge electronics, radar equipment, and navigation systems get salvaged and sold. Brass fixtures, copper wiring, stainless steel railings. Workers systematically strip everything. The engine room is particularly valuable. Massive diesel engines weighing over 100 tons get dismantled piece by piece. These engines often get refurbished and sold to power plants or factories. Propeller shafts made from specialized steel alloys. Generators, pumps, compressors, nothing gets wasted. But the real prize is the steel hull. A large container ship contains 40 to 50,000 tons of steel plate. At current scrap prices around $400 per ton, that's $16 to $20 million worth of raw material. Workers cut the hull into sections roughly 10 feet by 20 feet, each weighing several tons. These plates get loaded onto trucks and transported to rolling mills across India, where they're melted down and reformed into rebar, structural beams, and new steel products. Here's the crazy part. The steel from one large ship provides enough raw material to build housing for a small town. Literally. That 50,000-ton vessel becomes rebar for apartment buildings, beams for factories, and steel for thousands of everyday products. The entire process takes 3 to 6 months depending on the ship's size. Container ships are relatively straightforward. Tankers are more complex because they carried crude oil or chemicals, requiring extensive cleaning before cutting can begin. Navy vessels sometimes contain hazardous materials like asbestos that demand special handling. Alang can handle anything. The largest ship ever broken there was the Knock Nevis, formerly the Yara Viking, the biggest ship ever built. Over 1,500 feet long, 657,000 tons fully loaded. It took workers over a year to completely dismantle. When they finished, there was nothing left but sand where a floating city once stood. But here's where the story gets complicated. Shipbreaking in places like Alang is incredibly dangerous work. Workers operate cutting torches while standing on steel plates. Toxic fumes from burning paint and coatings. The constant risk of sections collapsing unexpectedly. Fires break out regularly when cutting torches ignite residual fuel or gas. International organizations have criticized conditions at Asian shipbreaking yards for decades. The Basel Convention, an international treaty, restricts shipping hazardous waste to developing countries. Some argue end-of-life ships qualify as hazardous waste because they contain asbestos, heavy metals, and toxic coatings. This created controversy in the United States. When the Navy wanted to scrap old vessels, selling them to Asian breakers became politically sensitive. In 2006, the USS Forrestal, a famous aircraft carrier, sparked protests when the Navy sold it for 1 cent to a recycling company that planned to take it to India. The public outcry led to stricter rules. Now the U.S. government generally requires American military vessels to be scrapped in EPA-approved domestic facilities, even though it costs significantly more. But commercial vessels are different. When cruise lines retire ships like Carnival's older vessels or container ships operated by American companies, they often end up in Alang or Chittagong, Bangladesh, another major shipbreaking hub. The economic reality is stark. Breaking a ship in the United States costs $30 to $50 million because of labor rates, environmental compliance, and infrastructure needs. Selling it to an Indian breaker generates $5 to $10 million in revenue instead. That $70 to $80 million difference explains why most ships still head to Asian beaches. But change is coming. Modern facilities in India have started adopting better practices. Some yards now use cranes to lift sections, reducing manual labor. Improved safety equipment. Better waste management for hazardous materials. The Indian government, facing international pressure, has implemented stricter environmental standards. Ship owners must now provide detailed inventories of hazardous materials before a vessel can be accepted. Workers receive better safety training and equipment. Meanwhile, some developed countries are building modern ship recycling facilities that can compete. A facility in Texas breaks down offshore oil platforms and ships using advanced cutting equipment and strict environmental controls. European companies have opened high-tech yards in Turkey that combine Asian efficiency with Western safety standards. These facilities prove shipbreaking doesn't have to be dangerous, but they also cost significantly more to operate, and the economics still favor Asian yards for most vessel owners. The environmental benefits of ship recycling remain undeniable regardless of location. That 50,000-ton ship would sit as a rotting hulk somewhere, if not recycled. The steel gets a second life instead of requiring new iron ore mining and smelting, which consumes massive energy. Recycling one large ship saves the carbon emissions equivalent to taking 30,000 cars off the road for a year. The metals, electronics, and other materials reclaimed reduce demand for virgin resources. And for communities like Alang, the industry provides livelihoods for tens of thousands of families. Workers earn significantly more than agricultural labor in rural India. The scrap metal feeds India's massive steel industry, providing affordable building materials for construction projects across the country. It's a complex equation: economic opportunity versus worker safety versus environmental concerns versus resource conservation. Innovation continues pushing the industry forward. Some companies are experimenting with robotic cutting systems that can dismantle ships in enclosed facilities, capturing all waste and protecting workers from hazardous exposure. Underwater cutting robots for sections below the waterline. Others are developing mobile shipbreaking facilities, essentially floating dry docks that can break down vessels at sea and sort materials systematically before touching land. From military destroyers to luxury cruise ships, from container vessels to oil tankers, every ship eventually faces the same fate. Some end up in modern facilities with cranes and safety systems, but most still meet their end on a beach in India or Bangladesh, where workers with cutting torches transform floating giants into tomorrow's buildings. So next time you see a massive container ship passing by, remember, that vessel's journey doesn't end when it stops carrying cargo. Somewhere, eventually, it will drive itself onto a beach one last time, where an army of workers will transform it from a ship into the raw materials that build the future. From ocean giant to rebirth as steel. Thanks for watching. Hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible stories of how massive industries work behind the scenes. See you next time.